Well, thank you so much for this invitation, Steve, and for the kind words. I appreciate that. And my name is Carr-Chellman. I'm a faculty member at Penn State Learning and Design Technologies. And I'm happy to be here for AECT 2013X, AECTx. I'm honored to be here, and I just want to mention, actually, this is my home association. So I'm a little more nervous than I usually am because this is family for me. And in fact, I was a recipient of one of the AECT Memorial Scholarships many, many years ago. So I hope I'm doing the association proud, and I'm glad to be here today. And I'm honored to be on the stage with Tom Reeves and with David Wiley, such luminaries. I'm just really thrilled to be here. I want to talk to you a little bit about a project that I've been working on the last couple of years now called Bring Back the Boys, which is really thinking about how we might use games in particular to re-engage a group of kids that we are losing right now. Active kids, all active kids, which mostly tend to be boys. It's not always boys, but it's mostly boys. So again, we don't want to essentialize gender. We know that there's lots and lots of difference within groups. But if we say to most parents what are boys like, this is what we wish they were like. We wish they would lay in hammocks and read and wear ties and be in Boy Scouts and dance with little girls at weddings, right? Okay. But what are they really like? This is what they're really like, right? This is what they're really like. They love to play video games and be superheroes and play with guns, and this is what they're really like. And most of them will tell you that their 2 or 3 favorite subjects in school today are what? Gym, recess, and lunch. Right? Those are, if you talk to boys, there's a wonderful video, a PBS video from quite a while ago called Raising Cain. Fantastic. And he interviews a whole bunch of boys. What's your favorite part of school? Universally, that's the answer, right? Okay. Is this a problem? Well, there are some pretty interesting statistics. And I won't go through all of them today, but just to let you know, if you happen to be a boy in America today in a public school, you're 3 times as likely to be expelled, suspended, in special education, in learning disabled or emotionally disturbed diagnosis. If you ask most reading teachers, they'll tell you that they've got 4 boys for every girl. Right? This is not a surprise probably to any of us, but it should be a bit of a wake-up call if we hadn't already realized this. You're 4 times as likely to be diagnosed as ADHD, and disturbingly, 75 to 80% of the world's ADHD medications are being administered to US boys. Not so much to girls. ADHD actually presents in girls in a very different way. They're often not medicated because they're quiet. Boys are not quiet when they have ADHD, okay? But we've got a lot of boys on medication, and we have to ask ourselves, are we medicating them simply because they're boys? Or active? Oh, I hear a hallelujah out there coming, right? I'm hearing amens out there. This is great. Okay, so I'm preaching to the choir. I need to move on probably because you already know all this stuff. PISA results. These are the tests that tell us, you know, you see the advertisements on TV about why are we 43rd in the world and things like that. These are the world tests that tell us where we rank. And there are lots of problems with these tests, but there's a very interesting finding in this last administration of the PISA test, which I think is fascinating, and that is that always boys have done not as well in reading. Girls have done not as well in math and science. For the first time in the history of the PISA tests, girls did better in everything in almost every country. Not just in reading and language arts, but reading, math, science, language arts, writing, all of them came through generally higher for girls, not dramatically higher, but a little bit higher for girls in all areas in almost every country. Britain has figured this out. They're very concerned, and they're taking very strong stance on what's going on with boys in their schools. Within higher education, we know that 60% of undergraduate degrees this year will go to women, young women. Many of the liberal arts universities now have about 70% women, which makes the university presidents very uncomfortable, as you can imagine. So higher education is an area that we're paying a lot of attention to right now. All right, why is this happening? I'll just very briefly hit on these because I really want to get to gaming, so I don't want to take too long with this part of it. There are zero tolerance policies in schools. The fact that they're there isn't the problem. The way they're administered is. Okay? The curriculum has been continuously compressed. We have more and more testing, and less ability for kids to just play and be kids and explore projects and do more open-ended things because they've got to get through the tests and prove the teacher, give her a good score so she'll get a good pay raise. And this is all interrelated, and this comes from policymaking. We can't blame the teacher for that especially. And we have fewer and fewer men in elementary school classrooms. We have half as many now as we had 15 years ago. And 15 years ago, we had 93% women in our elementary school classrooms. So we're down to like 96 or 97% women in classrooms. So if you wonder why boys may not be very engaged in school, they don't have a lot of role models that say education is important when they're first graders. So what can we do? There are a lot of interesting possibilities that open themselves to us. Jason Engerman and Doug Wilson, a couple of my students, have been working in an area of helping me to come up with, I hope this will work. Yeah, there we go. A website that will be a basic tool available for parents and teachers as well, but mostly this was a project that was funded by an anonymous donor, a foundation who gave us a little bit of money and said, please help me help my boys. I have a couple of boys and I'm really interested in helping them. They're just average boys. They're not, you know, autistic or something. I don't want a website that just addresses a very narrow group of them or just addresses minority boys. I want something that can be applicable to all boys. So we came up with this, which I think has turned out pretty nicely. We have lots of resources for parents of boys, and this should be rolled out in the next few months. Okay. Now, what about games? Games are a really interesting possibility. Games take boys especially where they are if we use them the right way. I don't much believe in the Trojan horse of technology. I don't think we sneak school change inside the Trojan horse of technology. I think we need to make it plain that what we're doing is trying to change the culture of schools by bringing in a very different kind of culture, which is games. Right now I've been doing some work in 3 specific areas. Petner and Vaishaw are working with me on understanding better what teachers say about games in schools. We're going to watch a piece of video here in just a minute that'll help us to understand a little bit better what they're saying, why they're resisting games in schools. Also, when we watch that video, you'll see that some of these things are generally applicable to all technology in classrooms. So it's an interesting piece that I think will be very useful for you to think about. Jason, are you here? Stand up wherever you are and wave if you're here, Jason. Jason is here, if you can find him somewhere in the crowd today or tomorrow. He's working with me right now on a major project in which we are taking what boys who are 13 to 18 years old and are playing off-the-shelf games, OTS, off-the-shelf games, so that's World of Warcraft, Assassin's Creed, those kinds of games. The violent games that you've all heard about, right? Mapping what they're learning onto the Common Core standards. When you ask a boy who's 14, 15 years old, what are you learning from playing Assassin's Creed? They'll say, well, I'm not really learning anything. But then when you talk to them about what they're doing, they'll give you a whole lot of information about what they're actually learning. They're learning a lot of problem solving, wicked problem solving. They're learning significant, content within things like civilization. They learn about social systems and the way that they are put together. They learn history. It's just fascinating. So we're starting to learn a lot of what the boys are actually learning that we can map onto the Common Core standards. So that's that second one. And then the last one is Doug Wilson's work in higher education, specifically looking at, we are doing some work with Penn State's Division of Undergraduate Studies. We've been examining the population of students who are not succeeding at Penn State right now. 2/3 of them are male. So this is just mirroring exactly what we're seeing coming all the way through. So we're doing some additional survey work in that area. I'm going to show you a few clips from this video, and these are teachers talking about games and how they feel about using games, and even more generally later about using technology, things like cell phones and things like that. I think this is a really illuminating piece of video.
Do you see any evidence of your students playing video games? I hear that they play a lot of video games. I hear titles, and I watch with excitement as one kid talks about what score he got or who he killed or whatever, and they're talking this language that I don't know. I mean, they're using some terms, and I don't remember the terms, but I know it's a video game, and it's got its own culture, you know, and the excitement that they show just for me being like a fly on the wall when they're talking, you know, sounds like it's a big part of today's kids' world. However, then there are times when that's what's done, but the homework's not done, and then that creates a problem for me during the day, because I have to find time for them to complete homework under my supervision, and there's not much time to do that. No.
Their writing as well. And that's the only place it really starts to concern me, is because they write about playing video games, and I ask them, well, don't you do anything else? And they say, no, I can't think of anything else to write about. Until the point where I had to ban writing about video games, just because I couldn't get anything else out of them. Which is okay, if that's their interest, that's fine, but sometimes I want something a little bit different too.
It's not okay with her, is it? She banned writing about video games. If this is what they're interested in, and we say you can't write about this, then what message are we sending them? We're sending them the message, you don't belong here. Later in the video, there's another teacher who's talking about projects, and she's sort of, you know, saying, well, girls are obsessed about different things, but they're not as obsessed as these boys are with video games. So it's interesting, because I think if we did some kind of, I don't know whether we could do any kind of real like litmus test where we could, you know, make little pink and blue things come out on a piece of paper if we pressed it up against a kid's head to figure out whether you were really obsessed about makeup just as much as he's obsessed about video games. If we could figure that out, I have a feeling that it's less about how obsessed the kid is and more about how much the teacher can relate to what's going on. As we'll see later, sometimes it's really hard for teachers to understand any of what this is about.
I think it's an underlying current in our society that, you know, the multimedia games and things that are a distraction mentally, you know, and even when I get out the laptops, there's the wantingness to go to a game site versus something else. And that's natural, I think, you know. And you know, other technology too is the cell phones. They're in their pockets. They're doing that while instruction is occurring, of course.
Not okay with him that you have the world in your pocket. You can get every bit of information that he can give you from your cell phone, but he's not comfortable with that, right? He wants to control what you're doing in the classroom. Understandably, he's got specific goals he's got to meet because he's got a compressed curriculum, right? So he's living in this really difficult space, but he's not particularly interested in opening that space up to a very different kind of culture.
I see evidence in their conversations, especially boys are at 8th grade, which is 13, 14, 15 years old. They are very preoccupied with the activities they do outside of the classroom, which to a large extent is playing video games, or maybe it's sports, either participating in a sport or watching sports on TV. They're very preoccupied with that. Girls have things they're preoccupied with, but not typically video games, as far as I can tell, just as far as I can tell by their kind of conversational topics. Boys will talk on and on and on about the video games. So currently this year, 2010, COD, Call of Duty, is what they talk about, and they are talking from within the game and shouting across the room to each other, hey dude, I just saw the D-Day opening, which means, I don't know what, some sort of D-Day war scenario. They achieved a game ranking that allowed them to enter into this new level of gameplay. So they'll talk about that, or the kinds of little levels or certification badges that they earn that show up on their status. I think this is an online role-playing game, and the more you play, the more kind of badges you get, or something like this. Of course, then they also have skills, and then they play against other kids who are online. So They do things like poning noobs, which is beating up or killing the newbies, or, you know, showing their fancy footwork, I guess. I can only imagine that they're in a little action figure and there's another little action figure that they're destroying in some way, or whatever they're doing to show their superiority. So poning noobs is what they live for.
We laugh at that, but you know, if this was your culture that someone was describing as playing with little action figures, it would really be pretty offensive. The way that she feels about video games is so obvious in her conversation. Part of it is that she doesn't understand it because she doesn't play. Very typical for most classroom teachers, understandable. But she has a real bias, and the bias seems to be about violence, which is sort of our next topic, I believe. They're shown Typing of the Dead. Typing of the Dead is an educational program in which they type and they kill zombies.
So you're learning how to type by killing zombies. And you're competing with someone else who's also typing?
It's like a co-op mode. So yourself and a teammate can work together to get through the level. And you both have to type.
Well, yeah. I guess sometimes you do what it takes to make it interesting. I don't know that killing zombies is the best approach in my eyes, but I'm sure the kids would be motivated to win and to learn to type better. I don't like the violence.
And even though this is kind of gruesome or whatever, that's what my age boys would like, and I have mainly boys. And if we get them to type, then I guess that would be okay with me, if the parents would be okay with it.
Violence is really probably one of the biggest things that keep video games out of the school setting, because in a school setting you can't have violence. I mean, it's just not going to be allowed, and it's hard to either redo a game so that there isn't violence in it, or just produce a game that has no violence.
I'm going to stop it there because I know we're going to run out of time. 3 minutes, okay. So I still have some more things that I want to say, of course. First of all, what is the problem with video games according to where these teachers are coming from? Certainly violence is part of it, right? We're very concerned about violence. The reality in the research right now on violence in video games is totally inconclusive and is starting to sway toward it's not producing violence in children. Right? That's what the real research that's actually out there, not what the media is likely to say, but the current research. The latest study actually that was done with students who were having significant problems with the law and so forth, and their play of video games actually seemed to correlate slightly, not cause, but correlate slightly with less violent outbursts, interestingly enough. So those kids who were in trouble with the law, who were playing video games, were less likely to have violent outbursts than those kids who were in trouble with the law who didn't play violent video games, just to make that kind of clear. There's a lot of competition in video games, and we want all of our, especially elementary classrooms, to be collaborative. And also, there's a lot of individual achievements in video games, and we really would like our kids to be working in teams. And so this is the culture of the school as compared to the culture of the games. And it becomes a significant clash, which is why it's so exciting to me and why it's so interesting to me, because it makes us question the culture of schools, and it makes us question and understand more deeply the culture of gamers. When we bring those two things together, which are not together right now, we have the potential to engage a group of students who have been totally alienated from schools to this point. So I think we should not be creating new educational games. Educational games turn kids off like that. But off-the-shelf games teach kids a lot of stuff that we don't recognize, so we should not be using educational games. What we need to do is take them where they are and figure out how to change the culture at the same time. That's what I would like to see this association take seriously. When you talk about gaming and gaming research, that's our charge. That's what I want to see us do. And I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.